Have you ever noticed how some people seem to get rich right before something becomes popular? They bought Bitcoin at $300. They invested in that neighborhood before it got trendy. They started that business right before everyone wanted it. Meanwhile, you're always hearing about opportunities after they've already happened, after the price went up, after everyone else already got in. Here's what nobody tells you. Rich people aren't psychic. They're not just lucky. They're not getting secret insider tips that you can't access. They're doing something completely different, something you can learn, something that has nothing to do with having money to start with. Here at Simple Money, we've studied how wealthy individuals identify and profit from trends before most people even notice them. And today, I'm going to reveal exactly how they do it. Because once you understand this, you'll start seeing opportunities everywhere. Opportunities that were always there. You just didn't know how to spot them. Here's what's really happening. When you see a trend, you're not actually seeing a trend. You're seeing the result of a trend, the final stage, the moment when it's already too late to make serious money. Think about it. When Bitcoin hit the news in 2017, it wasn't new. It had been around for 8 years. When everyone started talking about Tesla, the stock had already multiplied 10 times. When that neighborhood became the hot place to live, investors had been buying there for 3 years. By the time something reaches you, it's already reached millions of other people. The opportunity is mostly gone. The easy money has been made. You're arriving at the party after the best food is eaten and the interesting conversations are over. And here's the cruel part. You think you're being smart by waiting. You want proof it works. You want validation. You want other people to confirm it's a good idea. But that validation is exactly what kills the opportunity. Because everyone else is waiting for the same validation, and when they all get it at the same time, they all rush in together. That's when prices spike. That's when the opportunity disappears. Rich people understand something fundamental. Trends don't start when you hear about them. They start years earlier. In quiet places. With small groups of people. Before the media notices. Before it becomes obvious. And if you want to profit from trends, you need to find them in that quiet period. Before everyone else shows up. The first reason rich people spot trends early is what I call the signal versus noise principle. Most people consume information passively. They scroll through social media. They watch the news. They read whatever shows up in their feed. They're drowning in noise. Everybody's opinion, hot takes, clickbait, outrage. Rich people consume information actively. They're looking for signals. Specific types of information that indicate something is changing. Something is shifting. Something new is emerging. Here's the difference. Noise is someone's opinion about Tesla. Signal is noticing that Tesla job postings increased by 40% in 6 months. Noise is an article saying remote work might be a trend. Signal is seeing commercial real estate vacancy rates quietly climbing for 18 months. Signal is data, facts, observable changes in behavior, things that indicate something is happening beneath the surface, before it becomes obvious. Let me give you a specific example. In 2010, someone noticed that Airbnb listings in San Francisco increased by 200% in 1 year. That's not an opinion, that's a signal. It meant something was changing in how people thought about travel and accommodation. Most people didn't notice, because they weren't looking for signals. They were consuming noise, arguments about whether Airbnb was legal, opinions about whether it would work, emotional reactions. But someone who saw that signal could have invested in Airbnb, or bought properties in tourist areas, or started a property management company for short-term rentals, or created software for Airbnb hosts. The signal told you something real was happening. The noise distracted you from seeing it. Rich people train themselves to filter out noise and focus on signals. They ignore opinions. They ignore predictions. They look for evidence of actual behavior change. Real data. Observable trends in how people are actually acting? Not what people say they'll do. What they're already doing. Right now, in small numbers, before it scales. The second reason is what I call the follow the money method. Rich people don't follow trends. They follow money. Specifically, they watch where sophisticated money is moving. Because smart investors move first. Before the crowd. Here's what this looks like. Venture capital firms invest in hundreds of startups. Most fail, but they're seeing patterns. They're noticing which types of companies are getting traction, which problems are being solved, which markets are growing. When multiple top venture capital firms start investing heavily in a specific sector, that's a signal. They have data you don't have. They're seeing something. In 2012, if you noticed that venture capital investment in fintech companies tripled, that told you something. The financial technology space was about to explode. You couldn't invest in those private companies, but you could invest in payment processors, or banks that were adopting technology, or learn skills in that industry. Or here's another example. Watch what wealthy people are buying. Not luxury goods, assets, real estate, stocks, businesses. In 2015, wealthy Chinese investors started buying real estate in Vancouver and Sydney and Los Angeles. Not one or two, thousands, billions of dollars moving. That was a signal. Capital was flowing out of China, and it was flowing into specific real estate markets. If you noticed that signal, you could have bought property in those markets, or invested in construction companies there, or positioned yourself to serve that demographic. The crowd was complaining about foreign buyers. Rich people were following the money and profiting. Here's the key insight. Money moves before people move. Investment happens before awareness happens. Capital flows toward opportunity before the opportunity becomes obvious. If you watch where money is going, you see the future, not someone's prediction of the future. The actual future being built with real capital right now. The third reason is something I call the pain point detection. Rich people don't look for trends. They look for problems. Specifically, they look for problems that are getting worse. Problems that affect growing numbers of people. Problems that don't have good solutions yet. Because every major trend starts as a solution to a problem. And if you can identify the problem before the solution becomes mainstream, you can profit from the solution. Think about it this way. In 2007, smartphones barely existed, but a problem existed. People were carrying phones, cameras, music players, GPS devices, multiple gadgets. It was annoying. If you identified that pain point, you could predict that whatever solved it would become huge. You didn't need to know the specific solution, you just needed to know the problem was real and growing. Or here's a more recent example. In 2019, before the pandemic, remote work tools had a problem. Most companies used 10 different apps. Slack for chat, Zoom for video, Google Docs for files, Asana for tasks. It was fragmented, confusing, inefficient. That pain point was real, and it was growing as more companies went remote. If you identified that pain point, you could predict that companies offering integrated solutions would win. Even before the pandemic made remote work explode, rich people are constantly asking a simple question. What's annoying people? What's frustrating? What problem do you hear people complaining about repeatedly? Not what's cool, not what's trendy. What problem is getting worse that doesn't have a good solution yet? Because that problem is about to generate billions of dollars for whoever solves it. And if you identify the problem early, you can position yourself before the solution becomes obvious. The fourth reason, and this one is subtle, is what I call the edge observation technique. Rich people don't watch the mainstream. They watch the edges, the fringes, the weird corners where early adopters congregate, because trends start at the edges and move toward the center. Here's how this works. Every trend has early adopters, people who try new things first. They're not the mass market. They're the weird ones, the risk takers, the people who don't care what everyone else thinks. These early adopters cluster in specific places, online forums, niche communities, underground scenes, places most people never visit. If you want to spot trends early, go to those places. See what early adopters are excited about, what they're buying, what they're using, what they're talking about. Let me give you a concrete example. In 2015, if you hung out in certain online gaming communities, you saw people talking about streaming their gameplay. Not a few people, thousands. Building audiences? Making money? This was weird. Most people thought it was stupid. Why would anyone watch someone else play video games? But if you were watching The Edge, you saw it was real. Young people were spending hours watching gaming streams. Advertisers were starting to pay attention. Money was flowing in. That edge activity eventually became Twitch, then YouTube gaming, then a billion-dollar industry. But it started at the edges, with early adopters, years before it went mainstream. Or look at fashion. Fashion trends don't start in shopping malls. They start in underground clubs, on streets in Tokyo or Berlin, with artists and musicians and skaters, people on the edge of culture. By the time a fashion trend reaches the mall, it's over for the people on the edge. They've moved on, but the mainstream is just discovering it. Rich people understand this pattern. They watch the edges. They pay attention to what the early adopters are doing, because today's edge is tomorrow's mainstream. The fifth reason is what I call the convergence recognition. This is the big one, the pattern that creates massive opportunities. Rich people don't just spot one trend, they spot when multiple trends converge. When several different changes happen at the same time in the same place. Because when trends converge, they amplify each other. They generate opportunities that are bigger than any single trend alone. Here's what I mean. In 2015, several trends were converging. Smartphones were everywhere, internet speeds were faster, young people were used to video content, social media algorithms favored video. Advertising budgets were shifting online. Each of those was a trend, but the convergence of all of them at once created TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, a massive opportunity in short-form video. If you saw those trends converging, you could have started creating content, or invested in video editing software, or built a business helping brands make short videos, or learned video production skills. The opportunity wasn't in one trend, it was in the convergence. Or look at electric vehicles. Several trends converging, battery technology improving, oil prices volatile, climate awareness growing, government incentives increasing, Tesla proving the concept viable, charging infrastructure expanding. No single trend made electric vehicles inevitable. The convergence did. And if you saw that convergence in 2015, you had years to position yourself before it became obvious. Rich people train themselves to see patterns across multiple domains. They don't just know about technology, or just know about consumer behavior, or just know about regulation. They connect information from different areas. Because the biggest opportunities happen where trends intersect, where different forces push in the same direction, where change accelerates because multiple factors align. Most people look at trends in isolation. Rich people look at how trends interact, how they amplify each other, how they generate opportunities that didn't exist when the trends were separate. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Spotting trends early isn't the hard part. Acting on them is. Because when you spot a trend early, it feels wrong. It looks weird. Other people think you're crazy. There's no social validation, no proof it will work. You're moving before the crowd, and that's psychologically uncomfortable. Humans are wired to follow the group, to wait for consensus, to avoid looking stupid. So even when people spot trends early, they don't act, they wait. They want more confirmation. They want other people to go first. They want it to feel safe. But by the time it feels safe, the opportunity is gone. You're no longer early, you're late. Rich people overcome this psychological barrier. Not because they're fearless, but because they understand something crucial. Being early feels the same as being wrong. It's supposed to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is the price of the opportunity. If it felt comfortable, everyone would do it. And if everyone did it, there would be no opportunity. The discomfort is the filter. It's what keeps most people out, and that's exactly what makes it valuable. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus works in tech. Good job. Decent salary. He's smart, reads business news, follows trends on Twitter. In 2017, Marcus heard about Bitcoin. It was at $3,000. He thought it sounded interesting, did some research, seemed legitimate, revolutionary even. But then he talked to his friends. They said it was a scam, a bubble, tulip mania. His dad said it was gambling. His coworker said he'd wait until it was more established. Marcus decided to wait too. He'd watch it, learn more, wait for confirmation. By the time Marcus felt comfortable, Bitcoin was at $19,000. He bought a little. Then it crashed to $3,000 again. He sold at a loss, convinced everyone was right. It was a scam. But here's what Marcus didn't understand. He was consuming noise, not signals. His friends' opinions weren't data. They were feelings. Fear. Skepticism. Social proof. If Marcus had looked for signals, he would have seen venture capital flowing into blockchain companies. He would have seen transaction volume growing. He would have seen developer activity increasing. Real data indicating something was happening. But Marcus was waiting for consensus. And by the time there was consensus, The opportunity had passed. Now let me tell you about Jennifer. Jennifer is a real estate agent. She works with investors. She pays attention to data. In 2016, Jennifer noticed something. Permit applications for apartment buildings in a specific neighborhood increased by 60%. Construction activity was ramping up, but rents hadn't increased yet. The neighborhood was still considered sketchy. Jennifer didn't have much money, but she bought a small condo there. She knew developers wouldn't be building unless they saw something. They had data. They were acting on signals. Her friends thought she was crazy. Why buy in that neighborhood? It was industrial, no good restaurants, kind of dangerous at night. But Jennifer wasn't following opinions. She was following money. Developer money. Real capital being invested based on actual data. 3 years later, that neighborhood was the hottest area in the city. Jennifer's condo tripled in value. The developers made money, and Jennifer made money by following what they were doing. Jennifer wasn't smarter than Marcus. She wasn't luckier. She just understood the difference between signals and noise, between data and opinions, between where money was moving and what people were saying. Here's what most people don't realize. You don't need to predict the future. You need to observe the present more carefully than everyone else. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Some people are already living it. Early adopters, investors, people on the edge. They're showing you what's coming. You don't need a crystal ball. You need to pay attention to what's already happening in quiet corners. Before it's obvious. Before everyone knows. The difference between Marcus and Jennifer wasn't intelligence or luck. It was information diet. Marcus consumed noise and waited for consensus. Jennifer looked for signals and acted on data. Most people think spotting trends is about prediction, about being smart enough to guess what's next, but that's not how it works. Rich people don't predict trends. They observe them while they're still small. They watch for signals. They follow money. They identify pain points. They observe the edges. They spot convergence. And then they act. Before it's comfortable. Before there's consensus. Before it's obvious. Because the best opportunities don't feel like opportunities when they're actually opportunities. They feel uncertain, risky, weird. That's what makes them valuable. If everyone agreed it was a good opportunity, it wouldn't be an opportunity anymore. The price would already reflect that. The easy money would be gone. Signal versus noise. Follow the money. Pain point detection. Edge observation. Convergence recognition. These aren't tactics for rich people. They're observation skills anyone can learn. They require no money, no connections, no special access. They just require a different way of consuming information. A more active way. A more analytical way. Looking for evidence instead of opinions. Data instead of hot takes. Behavior instead of predictions. The question isn't whether you can spot trends early. The question is whether you're willing to look where no one else is looking. To pay attention differently. To act before you're certain. Because certainty is expensive. It costs you the opportunity. The people who profit from trends aren't certain. They're just observant. And they're willing to act on what they observe. Once you start looking for signals instead of consuming noise, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing patterns, changes, shifts, things that indicate what's coming before it arrives. And that awareness changes everything. Because opportunity doesn't come to you. You have to see it while it's still forming, while it's still quiet, before everyone else notices. That's how rich people profit from trends before they even start. Not by predicting the future, by observing the present more carefully than everyone else.